In 1852, on the LaRue plantation in Louisiana, a single act shattered the order that white society believed could never break. The master struck a pregnant enslaved woman named Clarissa so violently that she died before help could reach her. An attack carried out in front of people he assumed were too powerless to respond. He ended her life before noon, and by sundown, her husband Isaac had uncovered the coded roots, hidden names, and secret plans she had left behind. The master believed he had stopped a problem. Instead, he triggered Clarissa's entire network to awaken overnight. By the next morning, 1,000 enslaved people were moving in formation, armed with information she gathered in silence. And the man who thought no one would dare challenge him had accidentally started a war that would erase his own power forever. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you are watching from and make sure to subscribe, because tomorrow's story is one you don't want to miss. The morning bell clanged across the LaRue plantation before the sun had fully risen. Isaac's eyes opened to darkness. The familiar weight of Clarissa's body curved against his back. Her breathing came slow and steady, peaceful in the last moments before the day demanded everything from them. He turned carefully, mindful of the swell of her belly between them, and pressed his palm against it. The baby moved beneath his hand, a small flutter that made his chest tighten. "Time already?" Clarissa whispered. "Soon." Isaac's voice was rough with sleep. "Stay down a little longer. You were up half the night with that fever case. The Thompson boy needed me." She pushed herself upright anyway, wincing as she shifted her weight. His mother was terrified. "I couldn't leave them." Isaac stood and pulled on his worn shirt, buttoning it with fingers that already ached from yesterday's work. Through the gaps in the cabin walls, fog pressed thick and gray against the world. The sugar-cane fields beyond would be invisible in the mist, but he knew they waited regardless. They always waited. Clarissa moved to the small table where her herbs sat in careful rows. Dried leaves tied in bundles, roots wrapped in cloth, small clay jars of powders and tinctures she'd learned to make from her grandmother. She selected several items and placed them in her apron pocket, her movements practiced and efficient, despite her exhaustion. "The boy's fever should break today," she said. "I'll check on him after roll call." Isaac crossed to her and cupped her face in his hands. Her skin felt warm, soft. "You do too much. And you don't do enough?" She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. They both knew the truth that lived between them, that every kindness, every act of care in this place was an act of quiet defiance against a system designed to strip away their humanity entirely. The bell rang again, louder this time. Isaac kissed her forehead and stepped out into the fog. The quarters came alive around him, doors creaking open, voices calling to one another in low tones, the shuffle of feet on packed earth. Children emerged, rubbing sleep from their eyes, while their mothers hurried them along. Old Samuel coughed his wet, rattling cough as he limped toward the gathering point. Everyone moved with the same practiced urgency, the same knowledge that being late meant the whip. The overseer, a thin man named Cutler with a face like weathered leather, stood waiting with his ledger. He called names one by one, checking off each person with a mark of his pencil. His voice carried across the yard, flat and mechanical. "Isaac. Here. Naya. Here. Jonas. Here." The roll call continued. Isaac stood with his hands at his sides, staring past Cutler at the big house on the hill. Lights glowed in the windows. Master Julian LaRue would be having his breakfast now, waited on by house servants who moved through those rooms like ghosts. Isaac wondered if the man ever considered what it meant to own another person's time, another person's body, another person's very existence. Probably not. Clarissa emerged from their cabin as the roll call finished, moving more slowly than the others. Several women clustered around her immediately, asking after the Thompson boy, thanking her for the salve she'd prepared for a burned hand, requesting her help with a difficult birth expected in the coming weeks. She answered each question patiently, her voice carrying that particular quality of calm that made people trust her instinctively. Isaac watched her interact with the others and felt something fierce and protective rise in his chest. She was the heart of this community. She held them together when everything else tried to tear them apart. "Where were you last night?" The question cut through the morning quiet like a blade. Master Julian Leroux stood at the edge of the gathering, his jacket perfectly pressed despite the early hour, his eyes fixed on Clarissa with an intensity that made Isaac's stomach drop. Clarissa turned slowly, one hand resting on her belly. "Sir? You heard me." Julian stepped closer. "I came looking for you last evening. You weren't in your cabin." "I was tending to the Thompson boy, sir. He had a dangerous fever." "And who gave you permission to leave your quarters after dark?" The yard had gone silent. Everyone stood frozen, watching. Isaac felt his muscles tense, every instinct screaming at him to move, to step between them, to do something. But he knew what happened to men who challenged masters. He knew what happened to their families. Clarissa kept her voice steady. "The boy's mother came for me, sir. I couldn't let a child die." "You're lying." Julian's face flushed red. "I think you were somewhere else entirely. I think you were plotting something." "No, sir. I was—" "Don't contradict me." Isaac's feet moved before his mind caught up. He took one step forward, then another, his hands balling into fists. But Nia grabbed his arm, her grip surprisingly strong. She was Clarissa's apprentice, barely 17, but her eyes held a wisdom that made her seem older. "Don't," Nia whispered. "You'll make it worse." Clarissa must have seen Isaac moving because she turned and met his eyes. The message in her gaze was clear. "Stay back. Let me handle this." She stepped forward, placing herself more fully in front of Julian. "Sir, I meant no disrespect. I was only trying to help." "Trying to help?" Julian's voice rose. "You think I'm a fool? You think I don't know what you people do when my back is turned?" "Please, sir." Clarissa's hand went to her belly again. "The baby." "The baby is my property, too." Julian grabbed her arm, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Everything here belongs to me. Every moment of your time, every breath in your body. And when you sneak around at night, you steal from me." "I wasn't sneaking, sir. I was—" Julian's hand flew across her face. The crack echoed across the yard. Clarissa stumbled backward, her hand flying to her cheek. For a moment, the world seemed to stop entirely. Then Julian hit her again and again, his fury unleashing like a storm that had been building for years. She fell to her knees, her arms wrapping protectively around her belly. Isaac roared and lunged forward, but hands grabbed him from all sides. Cutler, two other overseers, men who appeared from nowhere to drag him back. He fought them, screaming Clarissa's name, but there were too many of them. Julian stood over Clarissa's crumpled form, breathing hard. His knuckles were split and bleeding. "Let this be a lesson," he said to the assembled crowd. "Disobedience will not be tolerated." He turned and walked away, his boots leaving clean prints in the damp earth. The overseers released Isaac, and he scrambled forward on his hands and knees. But Nia was already there, cradling Clarissa's head in her lap. Blood ran from Clarissa's nose and mouth. Her eyes stared up at the lightening sky, unseeing. "No," Isaac whispered. "No, no, no." He reached for her hand. It was still warm. Clarissa died as the sun burned away the morning fog. Nia held her while Isaac knelt nearby, forbidden from touching her by Cutler's threatening presence. The other enslaved workers stood in a loose circle, bearing witness to what had happened, what kept happening, what would always happen in this place built on broken bodies. They buried her that evening behind the quarters, in the small plot where others had been laid to rest. There were no proper markers, no headstones, just wooden crosses and stones to mark the places where people had once existed. Isaac dug the grave himself, refusing help. Each shovelful of earth felt like a piece of his heart being carved away. When the hole was deep enough, they wrapped Clarissa in a clean cloth, the best they could offer, and lowered her down. Someone sang a hymn in a voice that cracked with grief. Someone else prayed. Isaac couldn't hear the words over the roaring in his ears. When the others finally drifted away, he stayed. The night air grew cool against his skin. Stars emerged overhead, distant and indifferent. Isaac knelt beside the fresh-turned earth and pressed his palms against it, feeling the dampness seep through his fingers. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I should have protected you. I should have done something." But what could he have done? What could any of them do against men who held all the power, all the weapons, all the legal right to violence? His hand brushed against something in the dirt. A small cloth pouch, tucked into the folds of Clarissa's burial shroud. He pulled it free with trembling fingers, his heart hammering against his ribs. She had meant for him to find this. With shaking hands, Isaac opened the pouch and looked inside. Isaac's fingers trembled as he drew out the contents of the pouch one by one. The moonlight was thin, barely enough to see by, but he didn't dare risk a lamp. He pressed himself against the back wall of the storage shed, hidden in shadow, and spread the items across his lap. Papers, several of them, covered in symbols that looked like nothing he'd seen before. Not words exactly, but marks arranged in patterns. Circles with lines through them, triangles pointing in different directions, crosses of varying sizes. Between the symbols were sketches, crude but clear enough. Buildings he recognized. The LaRue plantation, yes, but also the Morrison place, 3 miles east. The Beaumont estate to the north. The old Duchamp property where the cotton grew tall and thick. His breath caught in his chest. There were names, too, written in Clarissa's careful hand. People he knew. Samuel from the Morrison plantation, who sometimes came through selling vegetables. Rebecca from Beaumont's, who had kin in the LaRue quarters. Others he didn't recognize, but each name had a symbol beside it. The same symbols that appeared on the sketches. Isaac's hands shook harder. He turned one of the papers over and saw routes marked out in thin lines. Winding paths that avoided roads and main thoroughfares, safe routes, escape routes, or something else entirely. "You found it." He jerked his head up, heart slamming against his ribs. Nia stood at the corner of the shed, her shape barely visible in the darkness. She moved toward him with that careful silence she'd learned from Clarissa, feet finding the quiet places between the gravel and packed earth. "How long have you been watching?" Isaac's voice came out rough. "Long enough." Nia crouched beside him, her eyes scanning the papers in his lap. "She told me you'd find it. She said if anything happened to her, you'd know what to do." "I don't know what to do." Isaac stared down at the symbols, the names, the roots. "I don't even know what this is. It's what she's been building for 3 years." Nia reached out and touched one of the papers, her finger tracing a line between plantations. "Communication routes, safe contacts, people who could pass messages without drawing attention. She was connecting us, Isaac. All of us, across every plantation in the parish." Isaac's mind reeled. 3 years. While he'd been working in the fields, while he'd been focused on keeping his head down and surviving day to day, Clarissa had been building something massive. Something dangerous. "Why didn't she tell me?" "She wanted to protect you." Nia's voice was soft but firm. "The less you knew, the safer you were. If Master Julian suspected anything, if the overseers caught wind of it," she didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "But now she's dead." Isaac's throat tightened around the words. "And none of it matters. It matters more than ever." Nia pulled one of the papers closer, holding it up to catch the moonlight. "She was close, Isaac. She told me that 2 weeks ago. She said everything was almost ready. Just a few more connections, a few more people in place, and then… She paused. Then we could start. Start what? Organizing. Really organizing. Not just escapes, not just resistance. Something bigger. Something that could actually change things. Thunder rumbled in the distance, a low warning growl. Isaac looked up and saw clouds building on the horizon, dark masses eating away at the stars. The air had changed. It carried that electric feeling that came before storms, that sense of something about to break loose. Around them, the quarters had grown quiet, but not with sleep. Isaac could hear the murmur of voices through cabin walls, the creak of floorboards as people moved restlessly. Everyone was awake. Everyone was thinking about what they'd witnessed that morning, about Clarissa lying broken in the dirt, while Master Julian walked away, unpunished. "People are talking," Nia whispered. "They're angry. Angrier than I've ever seen them." "Anger gets people killed." Isaac gathered the papers carefully, preparing to return them to the pouch. So does silence. Before Isaac could respond, a shadow detached itself from the darkness near the quarters. An old man, moving with a pronounced limp that Isaac recognized immediately. Jonas. He'd survived more years on this plantation than anyone else, his hair gone white, his back permanently bent from decades in the fields. But his eyes were sharp as he approached, and he moved with unexpected purpose. "You found Clarissa's work," Jonas said. It wasn't a question. Isaac nodded slowly, unsure how much to reveal. Jonas reached into his shirt and pulled out a folded piece of cloth. "Then you'll want to see this." He knelt with difficulty, his joints popping, and spread the cloth on the ground between them. It was old, stained with age and water damage, but the marks on it were still visible. A map, hand-drawn, showing terrain that Isaac recognized, the river to the east, the old cypress swamp to the south, the roads that connected the plantations. But there were other marks too. Symbols that looked remarkably similar to the ones on Clarissa's papers. 1811, Jonas said quietly. I was young then, strong. We had codes, meeting places, routes worked out between a dozen plantations. We thought we could take the city. We thought we could take our freedom. His voice grew distant. We were wrong. Too many died. I've carried this map for 40 years, waiting to see if anyone would try again. Isaac stared at the ancient map, then at Clarissa's papers, then at Jonas's weathered face. She knew about 1811? I told her, 2 years ago, when I got sick and thought I was dying. Told her everything I remembered. She made me show her the map, explain the codes. Jonas smiled, but it was sad. She said the mistake we made was acting too fast, without enough preparation. She said next time, it needed to be organized, careful, connected. Next time, Isaac repeated. She was building toward next time. Jonas looked up at the sky as thunder rolled again, closer now. And maybe next time is here. Lightning split the darkness, brilliant and sudden. For one frozen moment, the entire plantation was visible in stark white clarity. The big house on the hill, the long rows of cabins, the fields stretching away into shadow, the barns standing like dark monuments. Then the thunder hit, so loud it shook the ground beneath them. Another flash, another crack of sound that seemed to split the world open. Then, screaming. Isaac's head snapped toward the sound. On the far side of the plantation, near the main road, flames were rising. The barn, the huge structure where Master Julian stored equipment, grain, valuable supplies, was burning. Lightning had struck it directly, and now fire climbed the walls, eating through dry wood with terrifying speed. Overseers poured from their quarters, shouting orders. Bells rang frantically. People ran in all directions, some toward the fire, others toward the big house to protect it from spreading flames. Chaos, pure chaos. Isaac stood slowly, his eyes fixed on the growing inferno. Nia rose beside him, and Jonas pulled himself upright with visible effort. All three of them watched as the plantation's careful order dissolved into panic. She knew, Nia breathed. Clarissa studied weather patterns. She marked them on one of her papers. She knew storms were coming this week. Isaac looked down at the maps in his hands, at the symbols and routes and names, at 3 years of careful planning, at 40 years of waiting. He looked at the fire consuming the barn while overseers scattered like ants from a kicked hill. An opportunity. The sky was the color of old bruises when Isaac finally stopped moving. His hands were black with soot, his lungs raw from breathing smoke all night. Around him, other people stumbled through the gray light, their faces hollow with exhaustion. The barn still smoldered, sending up thin columns of smoke that twisted into the dawn air like wraiths. Master Julian LaRue stood near the ruins, his face purple with rage. He'd been screaming for hours, at the overseers, at the sky, at anyone within earshot. His expensive coat was ruined, his boots caked with ash. He looked like a man who'd watched his kingdom crack apart. Carelessness. His voice cut through the morning quiet. Negligence. Someone left a lantern burning. Someone was smoking near the hay. I will not tolerate this destruction of my property. Isaac kept his head down, moving past with a water bucket he no longer needed. The fire was out. The barn was gone. But Master Julian needed someone to blame, and blame always rolled downhill onto the backs of people who couldn't defend themselves. Every one of you is suspect. Master Julian's eyes swept across the exhausted crowd. Every single one. You think I don't know how you people think? You think I don't understand rebellion when I see it? A murmur rippled through the gathered enslaved people. Dangerous talk. The kind that preceded beatings, or worse. Isaac found Nia near the well, her dress torn and filthy. She met his eyes briefly, then looked away. Too much attention would draw notice. They had to remain separate, unremarkable, until the moment came. If the moment came. Jonas sat on an overturned crate nearby, breathing hard. The old man had worked through the night alongside everyone else, and it showed. His hands trembled as he wiped his face with a rag. Get back to the quarters, one of the overseers shouted. All of you, you've got an hour before fieldwork starts. People began shuffling away, too tired to do anything but obey. Isaac moved with the crowd, keeping Nia and Jonas in his peripheral vision. They needed to talk. They needed to figure out what came next, but not here. Not with overseers watching. He was almost to the quarters when small fingers tugged at his sleeve. Samuel, the Morrison plantation boy, who sometimes came through with vegetable deliveries. But he shouldn't be here this early. Shouldn't be here at all, unless… I got to tell you something. Samuel's voice was barely a whisper. His eyes were wide with fear. Isaac glanced around, then pulled the boy into the shadow between two cabins. What are you doing here? Making a delivery. Master Morrison sent greens for Master LaRue's kitchen. Samuel's words came fast, tumbling over each other. But I heard them talking. Master LaRue and the overseer. They were in the storage house, and I was right outside bringing in the baskets, and they didn't know I could hear. Isaac's heart began to pound harder. What did they say? They're selling people. Today. This morning. Samuel's voice cracked. Master LaRue said he needs the money to rebuild the barn. He said he's selling you first. You and that woman Nia, and some others. There's a trader coming at noon. The world tilted sideways. Isaac grabbed the cabin wall to steady himself. Noon. 6 hours away. Are you sure? I'm sure. He said your names. He said you'd bring good prices because you're strong and young. He said… Samuel swallowed hard. He said that pregnant woman who died was probably trying to escape, and he should have sold both of you months ago. Heat flooded through Isaac's chest. Clarissa. They were talking about Clarissa like she was livestock, like her death was an inconvenience rather than a murder. Go. Isaac forced the word out. Get back to your cart before someone notices you're gone." Samuel nodded and disappeared into the early light. Isaac stood there, breathing hard, trying to think through the exhaustion and rage. Sold, separated, shipped away from everything and everyone he knew, away from Clarissa's grave, away from the plans she'd spent years building, away from any chance of making her death mean something. He couldn't let that happen. He found Nia at the well again, filling a bucket. Jonas was still nearby, moving slowly toward his cabin. Isaac approached casually, as if he was just another tired person getting water. "Behind the barn," he murmured as he passed Nia. 10 minutes. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly. Isaac made the same pass near Jonas, delivering the same message. The old man's eyes sharpened, fatigue falling away for a moment. 10 minutes felt like hours. Isaac went to his cabin, washed his face, changed into a cleaner shirt. Normal movements, nothing suspicious. His mind raced the entire time. When he finally circled back to the barn's ruins, 5 people were already waiting in the shadow of the collapsed wall. Nia, Jonas, 3 field hands he knew from Clarissa's list, Marcus, who worked the mill, Ruth, who helped in the big house kitchen, and Thomas, who tended the horses. They all looked at Isaac with questions in their eyes. "Master LaRue is selling people today," Isaac said quietly. "Me and Nia for certain. Maybe others. The trader comes at noon." Ruth's hand went to her mouth. Marcus cursed under his breath. "Then we're out of time." Nia's voice was steady, but Isaac could hear the tremor beneath. Everything Clarissa planned. It was supposed to happen in 2 weeks. She had 14 more days of preparation scheduled. "What kind of preparation?" Thomas asked. Nia pulled a folded paper from inside her dress. Even in the dim light, Isaac could see Clarissa's handwriting. "Final weapon caches. Last messenger runs to the outer plantations. Confirmation that everyone was ready to move together." She looked up. "We're not ready. Half the network doesn't know we're about to act. We don't have a choice." Jonas's voice was rough but firm. "I've seen this before. In 1811, we waited too long, tried to get everything perfect. The moment passed. We lost. But if we move too soon," Ruth started. "We die anyway," Marcus interrupted. "You think Master LaRue is just selling Isaac and Nia? After last night? After that barn? He's scared. Scared men get vicious. He'll sell half of us off, beat the rest into submission, and lock down this plantation so tight we'll never get another chance." Silence settled over the group. In the distance, the morning bell was ringing. Fieldwork would start soon. Life would try to return to its brutal routine, pretending last night hadn't happened, pretending Clarissa hadn't died, pretending everything was normal. But nothing was normal anymore. Isaac thought of the pouch hidden under his cabin floor. 3 years of Clarissa's work. Maps and names and routes. A network spanning plantations across the parish. It wasn't complete, wasn't perfect, but it was there. She'd built it for them. For this moment, whether it came in 2 weeks or 2 hours. "Clarissa's dream doesn't die," Isaac heard himself say. The words came from somewhere deep, somewhere that had been broken when she died, but was now reforming into something harder. Not today. Not ever. Nia met his eyes. Slowly she nodded. Jonas straightened his bent back as much as he could. "Then we move now." "How?" Ruth's voice shook. "We're not ready. We don't have enough people. We start with the signals," Isaac said. "The ones Clarissa taught me. Simple gestures visible from a distance. We light the torches in sequence, just like she planned. The other plantations will see them. They'll know it's time." Thomas nodded slowly. "Morrison's place will see it. Beaumont's, too. They've been watching for the signal for months. Then they'll be with us." Marcus's jaw tightened. "Even if we're not perfect, even if we're scared, we're together." The sun was rising now, painting the destroyed barn in shades of gold and orange. Isaac watched the light spread across the fields, across the quarters, across the land that had drunk so much blood and sweat and tears. He stepped to the edge of the barn's shadow where the light touched the ground. His hands moved in the pattern Clarissa had taught him months ago, thinking it was just a game, just her way of showing affection across distances. But it wasn't a game. It was a language. First gesture, readiness. Second, unity. Third, now. He held his hands high so anyone watching from the distant fields would see. His heart hammered against his ribs. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then, on the Morrison plantation 3 miles east, a torch flared to life. Someone had been watching. Someone was ready. Another torch, this one to the north, Beaumont's estate. A third, far to the west, where the Duchamp property bordered the river. The signals spread like fire across dry grass, plantation to plantation, torch after torch catching light in the growing dawn. Isaac could see them all from his position, could see Clarissa's network coming alive exactly as she'd designed it. The uprising was beginning. The torches kept spreading. Isaac counted them in his mind. 8, 9, 10, each one representing another plantation joining the uprising, each one representing hundreds of people ready to fight. We need to move. Nia appeared at his shoulder, before the overseers realized what those signals mean. Isaac turned to face the small group behind the barn. Their faces showed exhaustion and fear, but also something else, something that looked like hope. Thomas, Marcus, you know where the communication lines run? Thomas nodded. Master LaRue has bell ropes connecting to Morrison's place and Beaumont's. Uses them to call for help if there's trouble. Cut them, Isaac said, quietly. Make it look like storm damage from last night. The 2 men disappeared into the growing light. Isaac turned to Ruth. The horses in the stable. Can you get to them? I feed them every morning, Ruth said. Overseer won't think nothing of me being there. Remove their saddles, hide the bridles, scatter the feed so it takes time to catch them. Isaac kept his voice steady, even though his pulse was racing. Don't hurt the animals. Just make it hard for anyone to ride out for reinforcements. Ruth nodded and slipped away. Jonas was already moving toward the old storage shed behind the quarters. I need 2 people with strong backs, he called over his shoulder. Nia gestured to 2 field hands who'd been listening nearby. They followed Jonas without question. What about the rest of us? Someone asked from the growing crowd. More people had gathered while Isaac talked, drawn by whispered words passing through the quarters. Isaac looked at them. Dozens of faces, young and old, field workers and house servants, people who'd watched Clarissa die yesterday and were now ready to risk everything. Spread the word, Isaac said, quietly. Don't shout, don't run. Just tell everyone, stay close to the quarters, stay together. When the bell rings for field work, nobody goes. A murmur ran through the group. Refusing field work meant punishment, meant whipping posts and locked boxes and days without food, but staying meant something different now. Nia, you take the messengers, Isaac continued. Use the routes Clarissa mapped. Fast runners only. They need to reach the outer plantations before noon. Nia was already pulling people aside, whispering instructions. Isaac recognized the pattern, the same system Clarissa had been building for years. Each messenger knew one route, one set of contacts. If anyone was caught, they couldn't betray the whole network. The organized chaos of the next hour would stay with Isaac for the rest of his life. People moving with purpose, quiet efficiency, no panic, no disorder, just Clarissa's plans coming alive through their hands. Thomas and Marcus returned first. Lines are cut, Thomas reported. Looked like a tree branch fell on them during the storm. Nobody will know different. Ruth came back minutes later, slightly breathless. Horses are loose in the far pasture. Took the tack and hid it in the hayloft. Overseer's going to have a hard time catching them. Jonas emerged from behind the storage shed with his helpers carrying a heavy cloth bundle. The old man's face was grim but determined. He set the bundle down and unwrapped it carefully. Tools, not plantation tools. These were older, rougher. Hammers and blades and things that could be weapons if needed. Buried so long the metal was dark with age. From 1811, Jonas said quietly. We hid them when we thought we might need them again. His weathered hands touched each piece like they were sacred objects. Didn't think I'd live to see this day. More people kept arriving. Isaac watched the crowd swell as word spread through the quarters. 50 people, 70, 100. All staying close, all waiting for direction. The morning bell rang. Nobody moved toward the fields. In the distance, Isaac heard shouting. The overseers had noticed. Master LaRouse's voice carried across the plantation, demanding people get to work. Still, nobody moved. Isaac felt the weight of every eye on him. These people were trusting him with their lives, with their families, with everything. Stay together, he called out, voice carrying across the crowd. Stay strong. Don't fight unless they force it, but don't back down. 3 overseers came striding toward the quarters, whips in hand. The crowd shifted but held firm. Isaac stepped forward to meet them. Get to the fields, the lead overseer snarled. Now. No. The simple word hung in the air. Isaac saw the overseer's face change as he realized what was happening. His hand went to his whip, but then he saw the crowd behind Isaac, saw how many people stood there, saw Jonas with his ancient tools, saw the defiance in every face. The overseer's hand dropped. He looked at his companions, who were already backing away. Master LaRue will hear about this, he said, but his voice shook. I expect he will, Isaac replied. The overseers retreated toward the big house. Isaac could see them arguing, gesturing wildly. One of them tried to run for the stable, probably to ride for help, but Ruth had done her job well. The horses stayed scattered in the far pasture. Nia returned with her messengers spread out behind her. 20 plantations have been contacted, she reported. 15 confirmed they're ready to join. The others are gathering people now. The sun climbed higher. Mid-morning approached, and with it came the sound of footsteps, many footsteps, from the road leading to the plantation. Isaac turned to see a group approaching from Morrison's estate. 40 people, maybe 50, walking with purpose. Behind them, another group from Beaumont's place, then another from properties Isaac didn't even recognize. They kept coming, streaming in from every direction like water flowing downhill. People who'd been waiting for this moment, who'd been watching for Clarissa's signals, who'd been preparing for the day they would finally fight back. By the time the sun reached its peak, the LaRue plantation quarters held more people than Isaac had ever seen in one place. The crowd stretched from the cabins to the fields, hundreds of souls standing together. Jonas appeared at Isaac's side. Never thought I'd see it, the old man whispered. Never thought it would really happen. Master LaRue emerged from the big house with his remaining overseers. They stared at the massive crowd in obvious shock. One of them raised a rifle, but LaRue pushed it down. Even he could see they were vastly outnumbered. What do you want? LaRue's voice tried for authority, but came out uncertain. Isaac didn't answer. Instead, he walked to the small rise behind the quarters, the place where he could see across multiple plantations. Nia and Jonas followed him. From that vantage point, Isaac could see smoke rising in the distance. Not just 1 or 2 columns, dozens of them, each one marking another plantation where the uprising had begun, each one representing hundreds more people joining the cause. He counted the smoke trails, his heart pounding with something he barely recognized, something that felt dangerously close to hope. Nearly every plantation for miles was burning or rising or both. The network Clarissa had built wasn't just responding. It was exploding into action across the entire region. Isaac stood on that hill and watched the old world start to burn. The groups moved down the river road like a slow flood. Isaac walked near the front, watching hundreds of people stream together from different plantations. They came in clusters, families staying close, field gangs moving as units, house servants clutching bundles of belongings they'd grabbed before fleeing. The sun climbed higher, burning off the morning haze. The road stretched ahead, winding between dense stands of cypress and oak. To the left, the river moved dark and silent. To the right, plantation lands rolled away toward distant smoke columns. "We need order," Nia said, appearing at Isaac's side. "Right now we're just a crowd. Crowds get scattered easy." She was right. Isaac could see people wandering, uncertain where to go or what to do next. Some kept looking back over their shoulders, expecting pursuit. Others argued about which direction was safest. "Gather everyone who came from your plantation," Isaac called out to the nearest groups. "Find people you trust to speak for each estate. We need to talk." It took time. The crowd milled and shifted while word passed through the mass of people. Eventually, representatives from different plantations pushed forward. Isaac recognized some from Clarissa's network, people she'd been communicating with for years. An older woman from Morrison's estate stepped forward first. "Name's Helen. I speak for 63 souls from Morrison's land." A young man raised his hand. "Marcus, 42 from Beaumont's." More names followed, more numbers. Isaac listened to each one, trying to hold the information in his mind. By the time everyone finished, he counted representatives from 11 different plantations. "We need leaders," Helen said bluntly. "People who can make decisions quick when trouble comes." Eyes turned to Isaac. He felt the weight of their expectation like a physical force. "Not just me," Isaac said. "Jonas knows strategy from the old days. Nia knows Clarissa's network better than anyone. We lead together, or not at all." Jonas nodded slowly. 3 heads think better than one, especially when those heads have different knowledge. The representatives agreed. Some looked relieved not to carry the burden alone. Others seemed skeptical but willing to try. "First thing," Nia said, "we need supplies. Can't fight or run on empty stomachs." Someone near the back of the crowd pointed down the road. "Supply wagons come through here twice a week. Thursday mornings, heading toward New Orleans." Isaac looked at the sun's position. Still morning. Still Thursday. "How many guards, usually?" Jonas asked. 2 drivers, maybe 1 armed overseer riding escort. The groups positioned themselves at a bend in the road where trees grew close on both sides. Isaac insisted nobody hide with weapons drawn. "We ask first," he said firmly. "Give them a chance to give up peaceful." Nia's jaw tightened, but she didn't argue. Not yet. They didn't wait long. The creak of wagon wheels carried through the still air before the supply train came into view. 3 wagons, loaded with sacks of cornmeal, barrels of salted meat, and crates of vegetables bound for market. Isaac stepped into the road when the lead wagon rounded the bend. The driver pulled hard on the reins, horses snorting and stamping. "Road's closed," Isaac said calmly. The driver stared at the crowd filling the road behind Isaac. His face went pale. "What is this?" "We need those supplies. You can drive away and tell people what you saw, or you can fight hundreds of people over food that isn't yours to begin with." The armed escort reached for his rifle. Jonas stepped forward with one of his ancient tools held casually. Not threatening, but present. "Think careful," Jonas said. "You're outnumbered bad. Ain't worth dying over someone else's property." The escort looked at the crowd, looked at his rifle, looked at the drivers beside him who were already climbing down from their wagons. "Take it," the escort said finally, lowering his weapon. "Just let us go." Isaac nodded. The 3 men walked back down the road, glancing over their shoulders every few steps. The crowd watched them disappear around the bend. "That was too easy," Nia muttered as people swarmed the wagons. "Next time won't be." Isaac knew she was right. But for now, people were distributing food, and children were eating for the first time since yesterday. Small victories mattered. They pushed farther down the river road as afternoon heat settled over the land. Word reached them about a plantation 5 miles east, where the owners were attempting to flee, planning to take their most valuable enslaved people with them. "We can't let that happen," Helen said. "Those people are chained in wagons right now." Isaac felt the weight of another decision pressing down. Every choice meant risk. Every action invited response. How many guards? Maybe a dozen. The families trying to move quiet and fast. The group moved with surprising speed for such a large number. They spread out through the trees flanking the road, staying hidden while scouts moved ahead to confirm the information. The plantation owner's convoy appeared an hour later. 2 carriages for the white family, 4 wagons for enslaved people bound in chains, and outriders carrying rifles. Isaac stepped into the road again, this time with 100 people at his back. The lead outrider pulled up short. "Move aside. Free those people," Isaac said. "Then you can go." "Their property." "Their people," Isaac interrupted. "And you're surrounded." The outriders looked around, finally seeing the crowd emerging from the trees on both sides. Their rifles wouldn't help against these numbers. One of the owners leaned out of his carriage. "This is theft. You'll hang for this." Nia moved forward before Isaac could respond. "You already stole everything from us. Our lives, our families, our freedom. Now you want to steal more people and call us thieves?" The silence stretched. Finally, the owners nodded to their guards, who unlocked the chains. Families stumbled free from the wagons, many crying, some too shocked to speak. The convoy continued without them. Isaac watched the carriages roll away, knowing this small mercy would be remembered as weakness by some and reported as violence by others. The freed families joined the growing group moving down the river road. By late afternoon, Isaac estimated nearly 1,000 people traveled together. They needed rest, needed shelter, needed to prepare for what came next. Defensive positions went up, where the road narrowed between dense tree cover and the river. Jonas directed people in setting up barriers using fallen logs and wagon parts. Nothing that would stop a determined force, but enough to provide warning and slow any approach. Scouts returned with troubling news. Militias were gathering in nearby towns, men with rifles and horses, organizing to put down the uprising. "How many?" Isaac asked. 50 in the closest town, maybe more riding in from farther out. They're planning something for tomorrow. The news spread through the camp like cold wind. People who'd been celebrating their freedom suddenly remembered how precarious it was, how easily it could be taken back. As sunset painted the sky orange and purple, Isaac walked through the makeshift camp near a cluster of old oak trees. Families gathered around small fires. People shared food from the seized wagons. Voices rose in conversation and prayer. Near one fire, Isaac saw children playing. They'd been freed from the convoy that afternoon. 2 girls and a boy, maybe 6 or 7 years old. They chased each other between the trees, laughing with pure joy. When was the last time he'd heard children laugh like that? Free and unafraid, at least for this moment? Isaac stood watching them until full darkness fell. Around him, hope flickered in firelight and children's voices. But fear grew too, spreading through whispered conversations about the militias gathering in towns, about what tomorrow would bring. He thought about Clarissa and wondered if she'd known how heavy leadership would feel, how every choice carried the weight of lives, depending on him getting it right. Dawn broke cold and gray over the makeshift camp. Isaac woke to find people already moving, packing what little they had, preparing for another day of uncertainty. The fires from last night had burned down to ash and ember. Jonas appeared beside him, moving stiff from sleeping on hard ground. "Scouts came back hour ago. Got news." Isaac stood, brushing dirt from his clothes. "What kind?" "The kind that means we got choices to make." Jonas gestured toward where Nia stood, talking with 3 young men who'd been running reconnaissance through the night. Isaac joined them. The scouts looked exhausted, their clothes torn from moving through underbrush in darkness. Militias setting up an outpost 8 miles northeast, the tallest scout reported, right where the old logging road meets the river crossing. They're planning to block any movement north. How many? Isaac asked. Maybe 30 men, but that ain't the worst part. The scout's face darkened. They got prisoners, folks they caught trying to flee their plantations yesterday. We counted at least 15 people tied up in a supply wagon. Nia's expression hardened. What are they planning to do with them? Heard guards talking. They're gonna hang them at noon today. Make an example so other enslaved people think twice about running. Silence fell over the small group. Isaac felt rage building in his chest, hot and dangerous. 15 people. 15 lives that would end as warnings to others who dared dream of freedom. We have to move north anyway, Helen said, joining the conversation. Can't stay here with militias closing in from 3 directions. Then we go through that outpost, Isaac said. Free those people and take whatever supplies they got. One of the other scouts shook his head. 30 armed men against our numbers, sure. But they got the high ground? That crossing's exposed on all sides. Nia knelt and drew in the dirt with a stick. Not all sides. Clarissa showed me that crossing 2 years ago when we were planning routes. She sketched quickly. The river, the road, the rising ground where the outpost sat. Trees come close on the western approach, thick enough to hide movement, and the river bends sharp just south of the crossing, deep enough a person can wade chest high. Jonas studied her drawing. You're thinking split approach. Hit them from 2 sides while they're watching the road. 3 sides, Nia corrected. Small group crosses upriver, comes down through the water. Main force pushes through the western trees. 3rd group waits on the road, draws their attention. Isaac saw the plan taking shape. Risky, but possible. How long to get everyone in position? If we move now, we can be ready by mid-morning, before they start executing anyone. The decision settled over Isaac like a weight. Every choice meant gambling with lives, but doing nothing meant watching 15 people die for wanting what every human deserved. We do it, Isaac said. But nobody takes a life unless there's no other way. We're here to free people, not become what we're fighting against. Nia's jaw tightened, but she nodded. The march north began immediately. Nearly 1,000 people moving through wooded country, trying to stay quiet despite their numbers. Scouts ranged ahead, marking the safest paths. As they drew closer to the outpost, Isaac split the group according to Nia's plan. Helen led 200 people through the dense western forest. Marcus took 30 strong swimmers upriver to approach through the water. Isaac remained with the main body on the road, visible and obvious, the bait that would hold the militia's attention. The sun climbed higher. Isaac's group moved slowly, deliberately, making enough noise to be heard. In the distance, he could see the rise where the outpost sat. Men moved around a cluster of tents. The supply wagon with its human cargo sat near the center. A militiaman on horseback rode forward when Isaac's group came into view. He stopped 50 yards away, rifle across his saddle. "That's close enough," the rider called out. "Turn back, or we open fire." Isaac kept walking. Behind him, hundreds followed. "I said stop!" The rider's voice cracked slightly. He was young, Isaac realized, maybe 20 years old, scared despite his weapon and his authority. "We're not here for you," Isaac said calmly. "Free those prisoners, and we pass through peaceful." "Can't do that. They're criminals, thieves. They're people who wanted to be free. Same as anyone would want." The rider's hand tightened on his rifle. "I got orders." From the corner of his eye, Isaac saw movement in the western trees. Helen's group getting into position. No sign yet of Marcus and his swimmers, but they'd be coming. "Those orders worth dying for?" Isaac asked. The rider glanced back at the outpost. His companions were gathering, rifles ready, but Isaac could see uncertainty in their formation. They'd expected to intimidate fleeing families, not face an organized force. A shout erupted from the western side of the outpost. Helen's group burst from the trees, moving fast. The militiamen swung toward the new threat, confusion breaking their line. Then Marcus and his people came up from the river, water streaming from their clothes, appearing like spirits behind the distracted guards. The militia broke. Some dropped their weapons immediately. Others fired wild shots that hit nothing but air and dirt. The rider in front of Isaac wheeled his horse and galloped back toward the outpost, then kept riding past it into the distance. Isaac's group surged forward. They overwhelmed the remaining militiamen through sheer numbers, pinning them without serious violence. Within minutes, the outpost was secured. Nia reached the supply wagon first, cutting the ropes binding the prisoners. They stumbled free. Men, women, 2 elderly people who could barely stand. All of them had been beaten. All of them wore the hollow eyes of people who'd accepted death. "You're safe now," Nia told them. "You're with us." The outpost yielded more than Isaac expected. Rifles, ammunition, food supplies, medical equipment, blankets, tools, everything the rebels needed to sustain themselves. Jonas examined the weapons carefully. "This changes things. We got means to defend ourselves proper now." As people distributed the seized supplies, the mood shifted. What started as desperate survival was beginning to feel like something more, like possibility. That evening, the group made camp beside a shallow stream where willows grew thick along the banks. The freed prisoners sat together, still processing their rescue. Children played in the water while adults prepared food. Isaac found himself standing apart from the celebration, looking up at the emerging stars. The sky deepened from blue to purple to black, and points of light appeared one by one. "You're thinking about her." Nia appeared beside him. "Always am," Isaac admitted, "wondering if we're doing this right, if this is what she wanted. She wanted people to be free. That's what we're building." Nia paused. "You promised them a settlement today." "During the planning." Isaac nodded. He'd said it without thinking, but once the words left his mouth, he knew they were true. If we can hold territory, we build something permanent, a place people can come to, where children grow up free. That's a big promise. It's the only promise worth making. They stood together in silence, watching the stars emerge fully. Around them, the sound of celebration continued, voices raised in song, laughter echoing across the water. For the first time since Clarissa died, Isaac felt something beyond grief and rage, a sense of direction, a path forward that honored what she'd started. The stars turned overhead, ancient and indifferent. But down here beside the stream, people who'd been property yesterday celebrated their humanity tonight. Tomorrow would bring new dangers, but tonight, hope felt real. The celebration wound down as midnight approached. Torches burned low, their flames shrinking to weak glows that barely pushed back the darkness. People settled into exhausted sleep, bodies curled against each other for warmth and comfort. The singing faded to murmurs, then silence. Isaac sat with Jonas near one of the dying fires, discussing plans for the next day's march. The old man's weathered face looked peaceful in the flickering light, more relaxed than Isaac had seen him since the uprising began. "We got momentum now," Jonas said. "People starting to believe we can actually win this." "Believing's dangerous if we can't deliver," Isaac replied. "Everything worth doing is dangerous." Jonas poked at the fire with a stick, sending up tiny sparks. "Your wife understood that. She planned knowing she might not live to see freedom. But she planned anyway." The words settled over Isaac like a blanket. Clarissa had known the risks. She'd built the network despite them, hidden the messages, prepared the way. Her death hadn't been the end of something, it had been fuel for the beginning. Across the camp, a figure moved through the shadows. Benton, a quiet man who'd joined the rebellion 3 days earlier, when his plantation fell to the advancing rebels. He carried a bucket, walking toward the stream. Nia appeared at Isaac's shoulder. "Where's Benton going?" "To fetch water," Isaac said. "Why?" "He's been nervous since we took the outpost. Won't meet anyone's eyes. Jumps at every sound. Half the people here are nervous. We're all running on fear and hope mixed together." "This is different." Nia's voice carried an edge. "I know scared. This is something else." Isaac watched Benton disappear into the darkness beyond the torchlight. The man had seemed grateful when they freed his plantation. He'd worked hard during the march, helped distribute supplies, never complained. Nothing about him suggested betrayal. "You're seeing threats everywhere because we're surrounded by them," Isaac said gently. "Benton's just tired like everyone else." Nia's expression remained tight, but she didn't argue further. She moved away to check on the perimeter guards, her footsteps silent despite the dry leaves covering the ground. Jonas chuckled softly. "That girl don't trust easy. Clarissa taught her to question everything. Smart teaching. Keeps you alive." Jonas stood with a grunt, joints cracking. "I'm gonna check on the children before I sleep. Some of them still shaking from what they saw at the outpost." Isaac nodded. The rescued prisoners included several children who'd watched their parents beaten, who'd been told they would die before sunset. Those images didn't fade quickly, especially not for young minds. The camp settled into deeper quiet. Guards walked slow circles at the edges of the firelight. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called, a sound that might have been peaceful under different circumstances. Time stretched. Isaac found his thoughts drifting to Clarissa, as they always did in quiet moments, wondering what she would say about the choices he'd made, whether she'd approve of the violence or condemn it. He'd tried to keep bloodshed minimal, but war had its own logic. Once started, it consumed everything. The first gunshot shattered the silence like breaking glass, then another, then a dozen more, erupting from 3 different directions simultaneously. People screamed. Confusion exploded across the camp as sleeping rebels scrambled awake, reaching for weapons they'd set aside for the night. Militiamen poured from the darkness, firing into the panicked crowd. They knew exactly where to strike. The supply wagons, the main gathering points, the areas where the most people slept. Someone had told them. Someone had drawn them a map. Isaac grabbed his rifle and ran toward the chaos. Bullets whined past his head. A woman fell beside him, clutching her shoulder. He pulled her behind a wagon, then kept moving. "Form lines!" he shouted. "Get the children to the trees!" But there were no lines to form. The attack had shattered any organization. People ran in every direction, some toward the woods, others deeper into camp, searching for loved ones. Nia appeared through the smoke, her face grim. Benton never came back from the stream. This was planned. The betrayal hit Isaac like a physical blow. He'd dismissed her suspicion. He'd let a traitor walk away because he wanted to believe people were fundamentally good, that desperation wouldn't turn someone into an informant. Another volley of gunfire tore through the camp. Isaac saw Jonas near the wagons, helping injured children climb into a cart. The old man moved with surprising speed despite his age, lifting a small girl who couldn't walk, settling her gently among the supplies. Then militiamen surrounded him, 4 men with rifles, shouting for Jonas to put the children down and surrender. Jonas didn't run. He placed himself between the children and the guns, arms spread wide. "These are children," Jonas said, his voice carrying despite the chaos. "You gonna murder children?" One of the militiamen hesitated, but their leader didn't. He struck Jonas across the face with his rifle butt, sending the old man to his knees. 2 others grabbed Jonas's arms, dragging him away from the wagon. Isaac tried to reach them, but the crowd surged between them. Bodies pressed from all sides, everyone trying to escape the killing ground the camp had become. "Isaac!" Helen grabbed his arm. "We have to retreat. There's too many of them." She was right. The militias had overwhelming numbers, and the advantage of surprise. Staying meant dying. "Get everyone into the forest," Isaac ordered. "Scatter and regroup at the old oak grove, the one Clarissa marked on the map." The retreat became a stampede. Hundreds of people crashed through the underbrush, abandoning supplies and weapons in their desperation to escape. The militias pursued, firing blindly into the darkness. Isaac ran with a group of survivors, pulling the injured along when they stumbled. Nia moved beside him, covering their backs, pausing to fire carefully aimed shots that slowed the pursuit without wasting ammunition. They ran for hours, putting distance between themselves and the burning camp. Behind them, orange light painted the sky as the militias set fire to everything the rebels had captured. Smoke rose in thick columns, visible even in the darkness. The forest grew denser as they pushed deeper. Low branches whipped Isaac's face, roots tried to trip him, but he kept moving. People sobbed as they ran, calling names of family members lost in the chaos. Finally, just before dawn, Isaac couldn't run anymore. His legs gave out, and he collapsed against a massive fallen log. Around him, the survivors dropped where they stood, gasping for air. Nia did a quick count. Maybe 60 people remained from their group. 60 out of hundreds. The rest were dead, captured, or scattered across miles of wilderness. Jonas was gone. Taken by the militias, probably already dead or wishing he was. The sky lightened gradually, revealing their exhausted faces. A young mother held her infant, both of them trembling. An elderly man sat with his head in his hands, tears running down his weathered cheeks. 2 teenagers supported an injured woman between them, her leg badly hurt from the running. Behind them, smoke continued rising. The dawn revealed the full extent of the disaster. Multiple columns of smoke from different locations, showing that the ambush had hit several rebel camps at once. Benton had given them everything, every position, every number, every weakness. Isaac stared at the smoke and felt something break inside himself. He'd led these people into disaster. He'd ignored Nia's warnings about Benton. He'd made promises about settlements and freedom and a better future, and now dozens were dead because he'd been too naive, too trusting, too stupid to see betrayal when it walked among them. "This is my fault," Isaac said quietly. Nia wiped blood from a cut above her eye. "Benton's the one who sold us out. You warned me. I didn't listen. We're all still learning how to fight a war. Jonas isn't. Jonas got captured because I was too blind to see what was right in front of me." Isaac's voice cracked. "How many people died tonight? How many families got torn apart because I thought I could trust everyone?" The survivors sat in silence, too exhausted to offer comfort. They'd followed Isaac's leadership, believed his promises, and now they huddled in the forest with nothing but the clothes on their backs and weapons they'd managed to grab while fleeing. The sun broke over the horizon, painting everything in pale gold light. Birds began singing, indifferent to human suffering. The forest continued its ancient rhythms, while Isaac drowned in the weight of his failures. The forest woke slowly around them. Survivors stirred from restless sleep, groaning as muscles stiffened from hours of running, reminded them of the night's horrors. Some people checked their bodies for injuries they hadn't noticed during the escape. Others simply stared into nothing, eyes hollow with shock. Isaac hadn't slept at all. He'd kept watch through the pre-dawn hours, listening for sounds of pursuit that never came. The militias had apparently been satisfied with destroying the camps and capturing Jonas. They hadn't bothered chasing scattered refugees through unfamiliar territory in darkness. Small comfort. Morning light revealed the full extent of their losses. Isaac counted 58 people, including himself and Nia. 58 souls out of the hundreds who'd celebrated victory just hours earlier. Most were field hands who'd never held weapons before this week. Several were children, some without parents now. 2 women were pregnant. One elderly couple sat together, holding hands, looking too tired to continue. They had no supplies beyond what people carried in their pockets. No food except a few pieces of dried meat someone had grabbed while fleeing. No medical supplies for the injured. No tools. No maps. No shelter materials. Just bodies and whatever weapons they'd managed to keep during the chaos. "We can't stay here," Nia said, approaching Isaac. Her clothing was torn, her face smudged with ash and dirt. A bruise darkened her left cheek, where something had struck her during the fighting. "Those militias might come looking once daylight makes tracking easier. Where do we go?" Isaac's voice came out flat. "Empty. We lost everything. Half our people are gone. Jonas is captured. We don't have supplies to last even 2 days. We go forward. Same as always? Forward to what? Another massacre? Another betrayal?" Isaac gestured at the survivors. "I promised them freedom. I promised them safety. Instead, I led them straight into a trap." Nia grabbed his shoulder, fingers digging in hard enough to hurt. "You want to give up? Fine. Sit here and wait for them to find you. But these people followed you because they believed in what Clarissa started, not because they thought it would be easy. Clarissa's dead because I wasn't there to protect her. Clarissa's dead because Master Leroux was a monster. Don't you dare take credit for his evil." Nia's voice carried steel underneath the exhaustion. She knew the risks. She built this network anyway, and she left insurance for moments exactly like this. Isaac looked at her sharply. "What do you mean?" "Clarissa told me things she didn't tell anyone else. Secrets she kept even from you." Nia pulled a small piece of folded cloth from inside her shirt. "She said if the rebellion ever fell apart, if we ever lost everything and had nowhere to turn, there was one final option." She unfolded the cloth carefully. Inside, written in Clarissa's precise handwriting, were directions and a coded phrase. "Maroons," Nia said quietly. "There's a settlement deep in the marshlands, maybe 3 days' walk from here. Clarissa made contact with them 2 years ago. She sent them medicine when sickness hit their camp. They owe her." Isaac stared at the directions. Clarissa had planned for everything, even total failure, even disaster. She'd built backup plans upon backup plans, networks within networks, insurance policies for the worst possible outcomes. "You really think they'll help us?" Clarissa saved children in their settlement when fever swept through. Their leader promised her a debt. Nia tucked the cloth away. "We have nothing else. No supplies, no safe camps, no friendly plantations nearby. The Maroons are our only chance." Isaac looked at the exhausted people around them. Children with tear-stained faces, women clutching injuries, men staring at the ground, shoulders slumped in defeat. They needed hope, needed a destination, needed something to believe in beyond endless running. "Gather everyone," Isaac said finally. "Tell them we're moving." It took an hour to get the group ready. The injured needed help standing. Parents had to coax frightened children into walking again. The elderly couple required assistance just to rise from where they'd collapsed. Isaac addressed them all, keeping his voice steady despite the guilt churning in his stomach. "We lost people last night. Good people. Jonas, who survived rebellions before any of us were born, got taken trying to save children. Others died fighting. More scattered into the woods, and we don't know if they're alive or dead." People stared at him, waiting for direction, for purpose, for anything to make the losses meaningful. But Clarissa planned for this. She knew rebellion was dangerous. She knew we might face disasters. Isaac gestured toward the marshlands in the distance. "There's a maroon settlement 3 days' walk from here. Free people who've survived in those wetlands for generations. Clarissa helped them once. They promised to help her people if we ever needed refuge." A young mother holding an infant spoke up, voice trembling. "What if they don't want us? What if they turn us away?" "Then we figure out something else," Isaac said. "But right now, staying here means dying. The militias know these woods. They'll send patrols once they finish burning our camps. We need to reach territory they won't follow us into." "The marshes are dangerous," an older man said. "Snakes, sinkholes, diseases. People die in there all the time. People die in chains, too," Nia said sharply. "At least in the marshes we choose our own risks." The group murmured among themselves, weighing impossible options. Finally, one by one, people nodded. They'd come this far. Turning back meant surrendering to the same system that had stolen their lives. Moving forward meant maybe, possibly, finding actual freedom. They walked in single file, following Nia's directions through increasingly dense forest. The terrain grew wetter as they traveled, solid ground giving way to muddy patches that sucked at their feet. Cypress trees rose around them, roots twisting above dark water like grasping fingers. Isaac stayed near the back of the line, helping those who struggled. A little girl named Sarah kept crying for her mother, who'd been killed in the ambush. Isaac carried her on his shoulders, letting her small hands grip his hair while he navigated the difficult path. "My mama used to sing," Sarah said quietly. "She sang while working in the fields, pretty songs that made the day go faster." "What did she sing about?" "Freedom. She always sang about freedom." Sarah's voice broke. "She said someday we'd all be free and happy. But now she's gone, and I don't feel free at all." Isaac had no answer for that. No words that would make a child's grief lighter or a mother's death meaningful. He just kept walking, kept carrying her small weight, kept pushing forward because stopping meant giving up entirely. The marsh surrounded them by late afternoon. Water stretched in every direction, broken by islands of solid ground and stands of ancient trees. Mist rose from the surface, creating ghostly shapes that moved with the breeze. Strange birds called from hidden perches. Somewhere in the distance, something large splashed in deeper water. They moved carefully, testing each step before committing weight. The pregnant women needed extra help navigating slippery roots. The elderly couple held on to each other, moving slowly but steadily, refusing assistance despite their exhaustion. The sun began its descent toward the horizon, painting the mist gold and orange. Shadows lengthened across the water. The temperature dropped as evening approached. Then Nia stopped suddenly, hand raised in warning. Everyone froze. Isaac strained his eyes, searching the mist for whatever she'd sensed. At first he saw nothing but trees and water and fading light. Then silhouettes emerged from the haze, human shapes, standing perfectly still, watching from strategic positions around the survivors. They wore simple clothing that blended with the environment. Several held weapons, spears, bows, tools adapted for defense. Maroon warriors, free people who'd survived in these wetlands for generations, who knew every pathway and hiding spot, who could vanish into the marsh like smoke if threatened. Nia stepped forward carefully, hands raised in a gesture of peace. Her voice carried clearly across the still water, speaking words Clarissa had taught her, a coded phrase that identified them as friends rather than threats. The warriors didn't respond. They simply watched, silhouettes against the dying light, waiting to see what these desperate refugees truly wanted from their hidden world. The warriors moved like shadows through the marsh, gesturing for the survivors to follow. They led the group along paths invisible to untrained eyes, solid strips of ground hidden beneath shallow water, roots that formed natural bridges, roots that twisted between cypress stands in patterns only locals could navigate. Isaac carried Sarah while watching the Maroons work. They communicated through hand signals, moving with absolute confidence through terrain that would swallow strangers whole. Every step they took landed on firm ground. Every turn avoided sinkholes and deep channels. They knew this marsh the way field workers knew cotton rows, intimately, instinctively, perfectly. The hidden settlement appeared gradually as mist parted. Structures built on raised platforms stood above the waterline, constructed from materials that blended completely with the surroundings. Walkways connected the buildings, creating a village that seemed to grow naturally from the wetland itself. Smoke rose from carefully controlled fires. Children played on secure platforms while adults worked at various tasks. This wasn't a temporary camp. This was permanence. This was freedom built to last generations. An elderly woman emerged from the central structure as the group arrived. She carried herself with unmistakable authority, back straight despite her years, eyes sharp and measuring. Her hair was wrapped in patterned cloth, and her hands bore the calluses of decades of hard work. The warriors deferred to her immediately. "Elder Myra," Naya said, bowing her head respectfully, "we come seeking refuge. Clarissa of the LaRue plantation sent us." The elder's expression shifted at Clarissa's name. Something softened around her eyes, though her posture remained cautious. "Clarissa, the healer? The woman who sent medicine when fever struck our children 3 summers ago?" "Yes. She organized the rebellion that just failed. She died before it began, killed by her master for imagined defiance." Elder Myra was silent for a long moment, studying the exhausted survivors. Finally she nodded. "Clarissa saved 4 children here. We promised her a debt. Come. Your people need food and rest." The Maroons moved efficiently, guiding survivors to dry platforms and bringing clean water. They offered simple food: fish caught that morning, roots gathered from the marsh, bread baked in covered ovens. It wasn't much, but it was freely given, shared without expectation of payment or servitude. Isaac helped settle people before approaching Elder Myra. She sat outside her dwelling, watching her community absorb the newcomers with practiced ease. This wasn't the first time they'd sheltered refugees. "Thank you for honoring Clarissa's memory," Isaac said. "Clarissa honored us first, treating our sick when no one else would, asking nothing in return." Elder Myra gestured for him to sit. "Tell me what happened. Why does a rebellion come to my marsh in pieces?" Isaac explained everything. Clarissa's death and hidden plans, the initial successes and rapid growth, the peak of hope when they freed prisoners and seized supplies, then Benton's betrayal, the coordinated ambush, Jonas's capture, the complete collapse of everything they'd built. "You blame yourself," Elder Myra said when he finished. "It wasn't a question. I was supposed to lead them to freedom. Instead, I led them to slaughter." Leadership means carrying weight no one else can bear. Clarissa understood that. She built networks knowing she might not live to see them succeed. The elder studied him carefully. "The question is, what you do now. Guilt is useless unless it teaches you something. I don't know what to do. We lost Jonas. We lost most of our supplies and people. The militias are hunting survivors right now. Then we take Jonas back. And we teach those militias why chasing people into the marsh is a fatal mistake." Isaac looked at her sharply. "You'd risk your settlement for us? We're all fighting the same fight, just in different ways. You chose direct confrontation. We chose invisible resistance." Elder Myra stood, gesturing toward the settlement. "But freedom isn't truly safe until everyone is free. If we don't help each other, we all hang separately." Nia joined them then, her strategist's mind already working. "How well do you know the militia's routes? Their camps and patrol patterns? We've watched them for years. They think the marsh is impenetrable, so they never post proper guards on this side." Elder Myra smiled grimly. "They're wrong about the marsh, and they're wrong about us." Over the next day, they planned. Elder Myra's scouts reported militia movements with perfect accuracy. They knew where Jonas was being held, a makeshift prison camp 3 miles north of the marsh's edge, heavily guarded but positioned foolishly close to wetland territory. The Maroons brought out maps drawn from decades of observation. They showed every patrol route, every weak point. every place where solid ground gave way to treacherous water. Nia studied the maps with fierce concentration, her mind piecing together possibilities. "We use the terrain against them," she said, pointing to a series of narrow paths. "Create false trails leading into sinkholes and deep channels. Make them think we're attacking from the east, while we actually approach from the south. They'll send reinforcements once the attack starts," Isaac said. "Good. Let them send people into the marsh, where we control everything." Elder Myra traced routes on the map. "We split their forces, disorient them, make them chase shadows, while the real rescue team frees the prisoners." A younger Maroon warrior named Marcus spoke up. "We can use the water paths. Militias don't know about the channels that cut through solid-looking ground. We lead them onto those paths, they sink, their weapons get waterlogged, and they panic." "How many people do we need for the rescue team?" Isaac asked. "Small group, maybe 6. Fast, quiet, precise." Nia looked at him. "You, me, Marcus, and 3 others. We move through the marsh while everyone else creates distractions." They spent hours refining details. The Maroons taught swamp tactics, how to move silently through water, how to identify safe paths in darkness, how to use mist and shadows for cover. They showed Isaac and Nia plants that could be crushed and scattered to confuse tracking dogs. They demonstrated calls that sounded like natural marsh birds, but carried coded warnings. Isaac felt purpose returning. Not the blind hope from before, but something more solid. They were building strategy on knowledge, not just desperate courage. They were learning from people who'd survived through intelligence and adaptation, not just luck. As evening approached the second day, final preparations concluded. The rescue team assembled their supplies: minimal weapons, dark clothing, waterproof pouches for anything that couldn't get wet. The distraction teams positioned themselves at strategic points around the militia camp. Night fell thick and heavy over the marshland. Mist rose from the water, creating perfect cover. The rescue team moved into position silently, following Elder Myra's warriors through paths that seemed impossible in the darkness. Isaac paused at the marsh's edge, looking back toward the hidden settlement where children slept safely on raised platforms, where people laughed around controlled fires, where freedom existed as daily reality rather than distant dream. He thought of Clarissa, of her careful plans and patient network building, of her belief that liberation required preparation rather than impulse. She'd built something that survived her death, that grew beyond her original vision, that connected field rebels with marsh warriors in common cause. "Clarissa," he whispered into the darkness, "I won't fail again. Jonas will come home. And everyone who helped destroy what you built will learn what it means to face people with nothing left to lose." Then he followed Nia into the black water, moving silently toward the militia camp where Jonas waited, where justice demanded collection, where the rebellion's next chapter would be written in marsh mud and midnight courage. The mist hung thick over the black water like cotton pulled thin. No moon penetrated the cloud cover. Perfect darkness surrounded the militia patrol as they pushed deeper into the marshland, following what appeared to be clear trails marked by broken branches and disturbed earth. The trails were lies, every mark deliberate, every sign false. Marcus crouched beside Isaac in waist-deep water, 20 yards from the nearest militiaman. They'd positioned themselves in a channel that looked like solid ground from above, but dropped into deep water the moment weight settled on it. The cold soaked through Isaac's clothes, but he stayed motionless, breathing slow and quiet. "They're spreading out," Marcus whispered, barely audible. "Exactly, like we planned." The militia commander barked orders, his voice carrying across the water. "Fan out!" "The rebels came through here. Tracks are fresh." His men obeyed, breaking into smaller groups to cover more ground. That was their first mistake. The marsh didn't forgive isolation. Two militiamen stepped onto what looked like a moss-covered path. The ground gave way immediately. They dropped into chest-deep mud that sucked at their legs like living things. Their rifles went under. One man shouted for help, thrashing, which only made him sink faster. Other militiamen rushed to help and found themselves in similar traps. Solid-looking ground became liquid beneath their boots. Panic spread through their ranks like fire through dry grass. "Pull back," the commander shouted. "Regroup at the entry point." But the entry point had disappeared in the mist. Every direction looked identical in the darkness. Trees became indistinguishable shadows. Water reflected nothing. The marsh swallowed orientation completely. Elder Myra's warriors moved through the chaos like ghosts. They knew every channel and safe path by memory. They appeared behind militiamen, struck quickly with staffs and fists, then vanished before anyone could respond. Nothing lethal, nothing graphic, just enough to create fear and confusion. Isaac heard shouts growing more desperate as militiamen realized they were fighting terrain, not just rebels. Some fired weapons blindly into the mist, hitting nothing but cypress trees and open water. Others abandoned equipment and tried to run, only to sink into hidden pools. "We've got our opening," Nia said beside him. She'd appeared so quietly, Isaac hadn't noticed her approach. The camp is practically unguarded now. Most of their force is drowning in the marsh. The rescue team moved north through paths only the Maroons knew. They traveled through channels that seemed impossible. Narrow cuts between tangled roots, shallow waterways beneath hanging moss, solid ground disguised by standing water. The darkness that confused the militias became the team's ally. The prison camp sat on slightly elevated ground near the marsh's northern edge. Torches burned around a central clearing where prisoners sat, bound and guarded. Isaac counted 5 guards remaining. The rest had gone to reinforce the patrol now trapped in the wetlands. Jonas sat among the prisoners, his shoulders slumped with exhaustion, but his eyes still alert. Isaac's chest tightened, seeing the old man's condition. Bruises marked his face, and he moved stiffly when shifting position. But Jonas was alive. That was what mattered. Nia gestured the team into position. They spread out around the camp's perimeter, moving between shadows with practiced silence. The guards were nervous, clearly aware something had gone wrong with the main militia force. They kept looking toward the marsh, where distant shouts still echoed. Marcus made a sound like a marsh bird calling. The guards turned toward the noise. That moment of distraction was enough. The rescue team struck simultaneously from 3 directions. Isaac moved fast, despite the exhaustion weighing his limbs. He reached the nearest guard and knocked him down with a shoulder blow before the man could raise his rifle. Nearby, Nia disabled another guard with quick strikes Elder Myra had taught them. Precise hits that removed fight without causing permanent damage. The remaining guards scattered. They ran toward the marsh, choosing flight over confrontation. The rescue team let them go. They were only interested in freeing prisoners. Jonas looked up as Isaac cut through his bonds. Recognition and relief flooded the old man's face. "Knew you'd come," Jonas said, voice rough. "Knew Clarissa's boy wouldn't leave me. Can you walk?" "Can I walk?" "Boy, I survived worse than this in 1811. Let's get these people out." They freed all 12 prisoners quickly. Most were field workers captured during the initial ambush. Some had injuries, but everyone could move. That was essential. Speed mattered more than comfort now. The team led the prisoners south toward the marsh, just as dawn began breaking. Gray light filtered through the mist, revealing the full extent of the militia's disaster. Groups of men sat exhausted on scattered patches of dry ground, their weapons lost or waterlogged, their formations completely broken. Some were still trying to pull comrades from mud traps. Others had given up entirely and were attempting to retreat. Elder Myra emerged from the mist near Isaac's position. She looked satisfied. The ones who can walk are fleeing north. The ones who can't are sitting in mud, waiting for rescue. Either way, they won't threaten anyone for a long time. Anyone hurt on our side? Isaac asked. Minor injuries. Nothing serious. We know this marsh. They don't. That made all the difference. By mid-morning, the entire militia force had either fled the region or sat captured, disarmed, and waiting to be released once they promised to leave and never return. The rebels and Maroons controlled the backwoods completely. The river road lay open. The escape routes were secure. Over the following days, they worked steadily to establish something more permanent than temporary victory. Elder Myra's people showed them how to build raised structures hidden within the marsh. Nia organized communication systems connecting the Maroon settlement to plantation networks still operating across the region. Jonas, despite his injuries, began training younger fighters in defensive tactics. Most importantly, they created a protected corridor, a clear route leading from dangerous plantations through the backwoods to the Maroon settlement's safety. They marked the path with symbols only those who knew Clarissa's codes could recognize. They positioned scouts along the route to guide travelers and warn of threats. Within 2 weeks, the first families arrived. Then more. Then dozens. Escaped workers who'd heard rumors of a safe place beyond the marsh. Families fleeing before they could be sold apart. Young people refusing to accept the lives their masters planned for them. The settlement expanded to accommodate them. More platforms rose from the marsh water. More shelters appeared among the cypress trees. More gardens took root in the rich wetland soil. The hidden village grew into something larger, a true free zone where slavery's reach couldn't penetrate. 3 weeks after the battle, Isaac stood at the entrance to the protected corridor as another family arrived just after sunrise. A young couple with 3 children, exhausted but hopeful, following the coded symbols that promised safety ahead. He helped them onto solid ground and pointed toward the settlement. Follow the raised path. Elder Myra's people will get you food and shelter. You're free now. Truly free. The woman wept. The man just nodded, unable to speak around the emotion choking his throat. The children stared wide-eyed at the marsh that had become their salvation. Nearby, Jonas sat teaching a group of teenagers how to identify safe water paths. His voice carried clearly despite his injuries, patient and steady, passing knowledge to a generation that would protect this freedom for years to come. Nia worked at a central shelter organizing new messages. Clarissa's network hadn't died with her. It had grown stronger, spreading further, connecting more plantations than the original plan ever imagined. Codes flowed through the region carrying hope and practical information about escape routes and safe destinations. Isaac walked to a small clearing where they'd placed a memorial stone. Just simple carved rock marking Clarissa's name and the date she died. Flowers grew around it, some planted deliberately, others appearing naturally as if the marsh itself honored her memory. He knelt and placed fresh wildflowers on the stone. "You built the spark," he whispered. "We built the fire, and it will never go out." I hope you found that story powerful. Leave a like on the video and subscribe so that you do not miss out on the next one. I have hand-picked 2 stories for you that are even more powerful. Have a great day.